The wind, a relentless artist, etched dust into every seam of her plain traveling dress, a harsh welcome to Harmony Gulch. Elara clutched the worn satchel tighter, its contents, a tarnished locket, a single well-thumbed book of poetry, and a hope as threadbare as her shawl, all she had left. After weeks of jarring stagecoach travel, the desolate outpost was less a promise, more a grim punctuation mark at the end of a very long, lonely sentence. The air smelled of dry earth and desperation. She saw him then, standing by the general store, a man named Jedediah Cobb, whose letters had spoken of a future, of a home. The man she had agreed to marry, sight unseen, for the simple promise of a life beyond the charity of distant kin. Jedediah was not as his words had painted him. His face, pinched and sour beneath a broad-brimmed hat, creased further as his gaze swept over her sturdy frame, lingering with distaste. Her heart, which had endured the journey with a stubborn beat, faltered. Around them, the sparse handful of onlookers, faces like carved wood, turned to stare. A woman, sharp-eyed and thin-lipped, nudged her companion, a soft, malicious titter echoing in the stark silence. Elara felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from the sun, but from the searing judgment in their eyes. She had known her size was not of the fashion, but never had it felt so much like a crime. Jedediah stepped forward, not with welcome, but with a cold, clipped tone that sliced through her last vestiges of hope. "This is not what I expected," he declared, his voice carrying just enough for the small crowd to hear. The advertisement spoke of a woman suitable for a rancher's wife. Not this, his gesture, dismissive and crude, encompassed her entirely. He did not extend a hand, did not offer a single word of kindness. "My apologies, miss, but this arrangement cannot stand. I require a wife of finer constitution." The word finer hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult for her ample figure. The humiliation was a physical blow, stealing her breath. She stood rooted to the ground, the dust settling not just on her dress, but on her very soul. Her journey, her dreams, her last desperate gamble, crumbled into nothingness. She was adrift, a lonely ship foundering in a sea of sneers and whispers. She saw the gleam of satisfaction in Jedediah's eyes, the collective agreement among the townspeople. There was no pity, only a chilling lack of humanity. As despair threatened to consume her, she caught a glimpse, fleeting and indistinct, of a man standing slightly apart from the others, near the blacksmith's forge. Tall, broad-shouldered, he watched, his face unreadable, his gaze steady. He was just a ranch hand, she assumed, another faceless witness to her public disgrace. But something about his stillness, his quiet observation, held a tiny, almost imperceptible difference from the mocking faces surrounding her. He was there, and then he was gone, swallowed by the harsh afternoon light, leaving Elara alone, abandoned, in the center of her shattered world. Jedediah, having made his public pronouncement, cleared his throat. "I cannot simply leave you to starve, I suppose?" he stated, the words laced with grudging charity rather than compassion. "There's the small cabin out near the north pasture. It's for the ranch hands who prefer to be apart. You can stay there, earn your keep by cooking for them, tending to the stable. Until you find your way." His tone suggested he expected her to vanish like smoke, her presence an inconvenience he wished to erase. The implication was clear. She was no longer a potential wife, but a burden, a charity case fit only for the lowest labor. Elara, numb with shock and shame, could only nod mutely. She had nowhere else to go. The cabin was little more than a shack, crude and drafty, smelling of damp earth and disuse. Her first days were a blur of aching muscles and a gnawing emptiness in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. The ranch hands, a rough lot, viewed her with a mixture of suspicion and casual contempt. They tossed their demands for meals at her with grunts and sneers, their eyes often lingering on her form with an unpleasantness that made her skin crawl. She learned to keep her gaze averted, her silence her only shield against their mockery. She was a ghost, moving through her duties, a large, unwanted shadow in a world that had no place for her. Yet, slowly, imperceptibly, a pattern began to emerge. A stack of firewood, neatly split, would appear by her door in the morning. A sack of flour, inexplicably larger than the usual allowance, would be left on her table. The incessant leak in her roof, which had promised to soak her in the next downpour, was suddenly patched, the crude timbers fitted with surprising skill. She never saw who performed these quiet acts of kindness. Most of the ranch hands were loud, boisterous, quick to boast. But one was different. Silas. He was a man of few words. His presence often felt more than heard. He moved with an effortless competence, his broad shoulders and calloused hands seeming to absorb the weight of the world without complaint. While the others chewed tobacco and spat insults, Silas worked, his eyes steady, his expression habitually calm, almost remote. He never joined the crude jests directed her way. More than that, sometimes, when another ranch hand made a particularly cutting remark, Silas would simply turn his head, and the comment would die in the speaker's throat, an unspoken command in his gaze. Elara began to watch him, furtively, from the shadows of the stable or the steam of her cooking pot. He was a mystery, a man who commanded a quiet respect from the very men who tormented her. She saw the other ranch hands defer to him, not just because of his strength, but because of an authority that went beyond the physical. He seemed to oversee Jedediah's entire ranch operation, solving problems, directing work, making decisions with an understated confidence that Jedediah himself lacked. One biting afternoon, as she struggled to haul a heavy bale of hay, her strength giving out, a shadow fell over her. Silas, without a word, reached down, his large hand easily grasping the bale. He lifted it as if it were feathers, placing it precisely where it needed to be. His fingers brushed hers for a fleeting second, and the contact, rough yet surprisingly gentle, sent a jolt through her. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen, not as an object of ridicule, but as a person capable and struggling. He gave her a single, steady look, his eyes, the color of rich earth, holding an intelligence that startled her. Then he simply turned and walked away, leaving her to process the unexpected tenderness of his act, the first glimmer of tentative trust stirring in her desolate heart. The days stretched into weeks, each one a testament to Elara's quiet endurance. Yet, the respite of Silas's subtle kindness was often overshadowed by Jedediah's increasingly malicious acts. He seemed intent on breaking her, on forcing her departure without the indignity of having to formalize her rejection. He would withhold her meager rations, demand she work through the night, or invent impossible tasks designed to wear her down. The other ranch hands, sensing Jedediah's approval, grew bolder. Their taunts became sharper, their attempts to corner her more brazen. Fear, a cold knot in her stomach, became her constant companion. It was during one particularly bleak evening, as the first chills of winter began to bite, that the escalating cruelty reached a new low. Jedediah, flanked by two of his cronies, strode into her small cabin, his face contorted in a sneer. "Woman," he spat, "I've decided you're more trouble than you're worth. Pack your things. By morning, I want you gone." Without a penny, his eyes glinted with a cruel satisfaction, envisioning her destitute and broken, cast out into the unforgiving wilderness. Elara, her hands trembling, stared at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was it, the final, brutal blow. But before she could speak, a shadow filled the doorway. Silas. He stood silhouetted against the fading light, his presence radiating a quiet, formidable power. "Cobb." His voice was low, devoid of emotion, yet it resonated with an authority that silenced Jedediah instantly. "The terms of the agreement state she earns her keep, and you will honor it." Jedediah spluttered. "This is my ranch, Silas. I say who stays and who goes." Silas took a deliberate step into the cabin, his gaze fixing on Jedediah, unblinking. "Is it, Cobb?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. He reached into his coat, pulling out a folded document. This ranch, Harmony Gulch, and all its holdings, was quietly purchased 2 months ago. From your creditors. You've been managing it under my employ until I chose to make my presence known. Which I now do. He unfolded the papers, revealing a seal, an official stamp, and a name written clearly beneath it. Silas Thorne. Not a ranch hand. Not just a manager. An owner. A very rich one. The air went out of Jedediah's lungs, his face paling, a sickening realization dawning on him. The cronies shifted nervously, their eyes darting between Jedediah and Silas, suddenly seeing the quiet man in a new, terrifying light. Alara stood frozen, her mind struggling to reconcile the stoic ranch hand with the powerful, unyielding figure before her. He had been there all along, observing, protecting, quietly ensuring her survival, testing the very nature of those around him, including her. A warmth, unfamiliar and profound, spread through her chest, chasing away the cold grip of fear. He had seen beyond her size, beyond the judgments of others, and had found something worthy of his quiet protection. His true identity was not just a revelation of wealth, but of a deeper, more profound integrity she hadn't dared to imagine. She felt, for the first time in her life, truly seen. Jedediah Cobb, a man who had feasted on the misfortune of others, now stood utterly diminished, his face ashen, his cruel bravado evaporating like mist in the harsh sun. "Thorne, you can't," he stammered, unable to finish his pathetic protest. Silas's voice, though still calm, was edged with steel. "I can, Cobb, and I have. You are no longer employed here. Your belongings will be delivered to the stagecoach by dawn. I suggest you take the first one out of Harmony Gulch and never return." He didn't raise his voice, but the weight of his words crushed Jedediah's spirit. The two cronies, sensing the shift in power, melted into the shadows, leaving Jedediah isolated and defeated. Then Silas turned his gaze to Alara. The intensity in his eyes was palpable, stripping away the layers of pretense and allowing her to feel, truly feel, the depth of his regard. "Alara," he said, his voice softening, a profound tenderness in his tone that made her breath catch. "You have endured more cruelty in these few weeks than most people face in a lifetime. You have done so with a quiet strength, a dignity I have rarely witnessed." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I did not reveal myself sooner because I needed to understand the true nature of this place, and of the people in it. And most importantly, I needed to see your true nature, unburdened by false promises or societal expectations." He extended a hand to her, not the calloused hand of a ranch hand, but the steady, confident hand of a man who owned everything, yet sought only one thing. "Alara, I came here seeking something genuine. I found it in your resilience, in your spirit that refused to break, in your quiet grace. I saw beyond what others judged, and I saw a woman of immense worth. I offer you a partnership, not born of convenience or a newspaper advertisement, but of true respect and a burgeoning affection. A life where you are not just accepted, but cherished, honored." Alara looked from his outstretched hand to his face, a face that had once been inscrutable but now held a clear, unwavering admiration. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long finally receded, replaced by a surge of strength and a profound sense of belonging. She was no longer the discarded mail-order bride, shamed for her size. She was Alara, a woman who had faced adversity and found an unyielding core of resilience. Her journey had been harsh, but it had stripped away the superficial, revealing the true gold. She met his gaze, her own eyes bright with a newfound confidence. "Silas," she began, her voice steady, stronger than she had ever heard it, "I have nothing but myself to offer." He smiled then, a gentle, genuine smile that transformed his rugged face. "You, Alara, are everything." She took his hand. It was a silent promise, a shared understanding forged in hardship and quiet observation. The dust and the desolation of Harmony Gulch no longer seemed so bleak. In Silas, she found not just a protector, but a partner who had seen her, truly seen her, and loved her for the extraordinary woman she was. The future, once a terrifying blank page, now stretched before them, a testament to the enduring power of resilience, dignity, and a love that saw beyond the surface, finding beauty in the strength of an unyielding heart. The silence of the vast landscape no longer felt empty, but full of the quiet promise of a life built on solid ground, brick by precious brick.